What if I told you that memorizing the absolute perfect, like mathematically correct strategy for a complex game is actually the exact reason you're probably losing at it?
Right. I mean, it sounds like a complete paradox. We're so conditioned to believe that if you just master the underlying theory of a skill, success is, just a guaranteed byproduct.
Exactly. But the data we're looking at today tells a totally different story. Welcome to today's deep dive, where we are jumping right into that massive, incredibly frustrating void between wanting to get better at something and, well, actually improving.
Yeah, and the sources we have on the table for this are fascinating. We've got this mix of strategy manifestos and some really intense AI-driven data analysis from a poker training platform called RangeFlow.
And I want to say right up front to you listening, even if you have never played a single hand of Texas, Hold'em in your
Yeah.
entire life, seriously, stick around because this is going to fundamentally change how you think about skill acquisition. It changes how you make decisions under pressure and why the so-called smart or theoretical approach is very often the exact reason people fail in the real world.
It really is a masterclass in human psychology and systems thinking. The poker table just happens to be the laboratory where all of this data was collected.
Okay, let's unpack this. The core premise from these range flow sources tackles probably the most common piece of advice given to anyone trying to master a new skill, right? Whether that's day trading, sales negotiations, a new sport.
The advice is always just get your reps in.
Right. Put in the hours, play more volume. But the AI data completely shreds that idea. It
Mhm.
actually suggests that just logging hours without a system is destructive.
Because repetition without immediate objective feedback doesn't create mastery. It just creates
Oh,
permanence.
that's a good way to put it.
Right. Like if your default reaction in a specific high pressure situation is fundamentally flawed,
Yeah.
facing that exact same situation 1,000 more times does not fix the flaw. It simply cements the bad habit into your neural pathway.
Right.
You're literally chaining your brain to feel comfortable making the wrong choice.
So you're just becoming incredibly efficient at making mistakes.
That is the harsh reality for most people. I mean, the sources really highlight the absurdity of how a typical player approaches improvement. They treat every single session as a standalone event based almost entirely on, well, feelings.
The vibes, basically.
Exactly. They sit down at a fresh table and make decisions based on the vibes of that particular night. If they're running hot and winning, their confidence peaks and they play aggressively.
Right.
But the moment they suffer a bad beat like, just a stroke of bad luck, doubt creeps in immediately. And they start playing tight and passive.
Which, as the strategy manifestos point out, essentially hangs a giant neon sign around your neck that says, I am scared, please exploit me.
Right. They're riding a roller coaster of variance. They are reacting emotionally to short-term outcomes instead of building, a continuous data-driven framework.
Wait, hold on. Let me play devil's advocate here for a second, because the sources actually anticipate this exact counter argument.
Sure, go for it.
If just playing more doesn't work, and writing my feelings leads to disaster, then the logical next step is studying the perfect theoretical math of the game.
Makes sense.
Right. Like if I spend my time watching the high-level training videos, if I read the textbooks, and I learn what they call game theory optimal strategy, or GTO for short, shouldn't I be absolutely crushing the guys at the table who don't even know what a continuation bet is?
And that right there is the logical trap that catches almost every dedicated student of the game. Let's actually define that term really quickly for the listener. A continuation bet is when the person who took the lead and raised the bet before the cards were dealt continues to aggressively bet after the cards are revealed.
Got it. Projecting strength.
Exactly. And knowing concepts like that and mastering game theory optimal play, it feels like it should be the ultimate weapon. But it leads to one of the most painful ironies in skill acquisition.
Yeah, the sources have a great way of framing it. They say it's less like the old cliche of bringing chess to checkers and more like bringing a perfectly programmed, rule-abiding, self-driving car to a demolition derby.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Right. The AI is following all the traffic laws perfectly. It's signaling its turns, maintaining the speed limit, and it's getting absolute crushed because all the other drivers are actively trying to crash into it.
That is a perfect analogy.
Mm.
And what's fascinating here is why the math loses. The RangeFlow data didn't just look at hypothetical simulations.
No, they looked at real games.
Right. They analyzed over 4 million real cash game hands. Real people, real money, real pressure. And they found that the regs, the regular studying, thinking players, are constantly bleeding chips to the reckless amateur players.
The sources use a specific term for these highly erratic amateurs, right? Donks.
Yeah, donks. The thinking players are losing because they're playing a solved game against completely unsolved opponents.
But wait, I have to push back on that a little bit. If GTO literally stands for game theory optimal, then by definition, shouldn't the math guarantee a win over a long enough timeline? I mean, are you telling me the laws of probability are just wrong?
No, no, the math isn't wrong, but the application of the math is deeply flawed.
Yeah.
GTO assumes you are playing against another perfectly rational actor who is also trying to play a balanced mathematical game.
Ah.
But these reckless amateurs aren't doing that. They don't know what GTO means. So they might shove a massive amount of chips into the pot on the final card with a terrible hand just because they, feel lucky.
Okay, and the textbook mathematically dictates that you should fold in that situation.
Right, because a rational player would only bet that much with a premium hand, so you fold the winning hand.
Oh, man. Or the exact reverse happens. You make this brilliant, mathematically balanced bluff, and they call you with absolute garbage just because they wanted to see your cards.
Exactly. And they happen to win. And what does the thinking player do in that moment?
They throw their hands up and complain about bad luck.
Yep, they call the other guy an idiot.
Yeah.
But the algorithm reveals a much harsher truth here. According to that database of 4 million hands, the average thinking player isn't just getting unlucky. They are making 47 specific, exploitable mistakes every single session.
Wait. 47?
47
Every time they sit down?
every single time. They are leaking money in 47 different measurable situations where their correct textbook play is actually the exact wrong play against that specific, unpredictable human being.
So the chaos of the amateur perfectly punishes the rigid rules of the student?
Exactly.
And the craziest part from the source material is that these erratic players aren't even exploiting you on purpose. Like, they aren't evil geniuses setting these elaborate traps.
Not at all.
They're just playing their chaotic game, totally unaware that their irrationality happens to be the perfect kryptonite for your theoretical chess move.
Which brings us to a massive pivot point. If the textbook fails against real chaotic humans, the entire paradigm has to shift.
Right. The most important question becomes, how do you actually play the human? The sources call this the poker in poker.
Yes, the meta strategy.
Exactly. Let's use a really specific example from the text to make this concrete for anyone listening who doesn't play. So let's say you're sitting in a position called the button. All that means is you get to act last, which is a huge advantage because you get to see what everyone else does first.
Right, tons of information.
Exactly. You look down at your two private cards and you have an ace and a king. That is a premium starting hand. Now, level one, thinking the textbook, theoretical thinking, is looking at those cards and saying, I have a statistically superior hand, therefore I will raise the bet.
Notice how that thought process is entirely isolated. It is completely focused on the self and the absolute mathematical value of the cards in a vacuum.
Right. But the poker in poker meta strategy asks a totally different question. It completely zooms out. It asks, what does this specific opponent across the table expect me to do right now? And how do I use their assumption against them?
Right, turning the table.
So let's say the guy acting before you, the guy in the blind, who had to put forced money in before the cards were even dealt, he's been aggressively, recklessly raising you all night. Maybe you don't raise your ace-king.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, maybe you just call his bet. You intentionally act weak, letting him think he has you scared, allowing him to confidently blast all his chips right into your trap.
You are no longer playing the cards, you are playing the player's psychology. And this is where that massive database of 4 million hands transitions from being just a collection of trivia into an absolute superpower.
Yeah, the RangeFlow AI isn't just tracking which cards win.
No, it is tracking human behavioral tendencies at scale. It literally maps out the exact statistical profile of human irrationality.
If you're listening right now and wondering just how predictable people really can be, these stats are going to completely blow your mind. I want to dig into the mechanisms here because it's not just about poker.
It's deeply psychological. For instance, the RangeFlow data shows that 67% of players in these pools will overfold, meaning they surrender and give up their hand far too easily if you bet aggressively on all three streets of the hand when the community cards look scary.
Okay, let me translate that real quick. The three streets are the 3 rounds of betting after the community cards are revealed. The flop, the turn, and the river. So if a scary card hits like an ace or a card that completes a flush and you just keep firing bets relentlessly 2/3 of the time, the opponent panics and runs away. Why? Like, what is the brain doing there?
It's classic loss aversion.
Yeah.
Humans are hardwired to feel the pain of losing money about twice as intensely as the joy of winning.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. When those aggressive bets keep coming right alongside scary cards, the amateur's brain just stops calculating probabilities. They start visualizing worst-case scenarios. The fear of losing a massive pile of chips completely overrides the statistical likelihood that you might just be bluffing.
Okay, here's another wild one from the data. 73% of recreational players will call your bet way too widely on the very first round of cards, the flop, but then they fold way too much on the very next card, the turn.
That right there is the battle between curiosity and sudden reality.
Oh.
On the flop, the bets are usually smaller. The recreational player is curious. They have an optimistic bias. They want to stick around just to see what happens.
Right, the price of admission is cheap.
Exactly. But when the turn card hits, the bet sizes typically double or triple. Suddenly, the price of admission completely shatters their optimism. The sunk cost isn't enough to keep them in, so they abandon ship entirely.
And the most extreme stat in the entire manifesto, 81% of players who are acting aggressively will completely shut down, panic, and surrender if you check raise them on a paired board.
Which is just incredible.
I need to explain this one because it's so brilliant. A paired board means two of the shared community cards are the exact same rank, like two jacks. This is scary because it means someone could easily have three of a kind. A check raise is when you initially act weak by checking, passing the action to them, letting them bet, and then you suddenly spring a massive raise on them.
The mechanism at play there is an immediate visual panic response. The amateur sees the pair of jacks on the board. They bet, feeling super confident. Suddenly, you explode with a massive raise. Their brain immediately fills in the blank. They have the third jack. I am dead.
They don't even consider the math that there are only two other jacks left in the entire deck, making it statistically unlikely you actually have one.
Right. They just see the monster under the bed, and 81% of the time, they fold.
Think about the implications of that for a second. Those aren't just minor mathematical edges. Those are massive, totally exploitable cognitive blind spots.
Imagine having that kind of predictive data in a business negotiation.
Oh, totally.
Or a sales pitch, or a legal deposition. When you know the exact statistical tendencies of the human beings sitting across from you, when you know exactly where their loss aversion will kick in, where their curiosity will shatter, and what visual cues will cause a panic response, you stop guessing.
Right.
You stop trying to play a perfect theoretical game. You start playing for maximum real-world profit. The sources call this becoming a donk hunter. You stop hoping the deck gives you good cards, and you start systematically hunting for the psychological mistakes your opponents are statistically guaranteed to make.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Intellectually, that makes total sense. Like, yes, I want to be the hunter, not the prey. But knowing these statistics while I'm sitting on my couch drinking a latte is one thing. Remembering that 81% of players shut down on a paired board, when the pot is huge, my real money is on the line, my heart is pounding in my ears, and the shot clock is ticking down.
Right, that is a totally different beast.
Exactly. How do we actually bridge that massive gap between knowing the fear and executing it under all that adrenaline?
That is the ultimate bottleneck in skill acquisition. How do you actually make knowledge accessible when the pressure hits?
Well, the sources absolutely tear apart how most people try to learn to bridge this gap. Most players sit back, they watch a 90-minute video lecture by some professional player, they nod along, and they feel like they're absorbing absolute genius.
But the entire process is completely passive.
Right. I love the analogy the manifesto uses here. It is like watching a cooking show on television and expecting to walk into a high-end commercial kitchen during the Friday dinner rush and just become a master chef.
It doesn't work. Real training, the kind of training that survives pressure, requires active decision-making.
To use another analogy, it's like the difference between listening to a Spanish audio course in the background while you're folding laundry versus actually being dropped in the middle of Madrid and being forced to order your dinner in Spanish.
One feels like learning.
Yeah, one feels productive. But
Right.
the other one, the one with real friction and actual stakes, is what forces the brain to build new neural pathways.
The contrast is between the illusion of competence and actual capability. And to build that capability, the sources detail the daily routine of serious grinders who are actually seeing upward curves in their profit. It's not an 8-hour marathon of reading dense math textbooks.
What is it then?
It is a highly focused, strict, 20-minute active training loop.
Okay, walk us through that 20 minutes. What does that actually look like for someone trying to systematize their learning?
It's broken down into 3 distinct non-negotiable phases. First, you spend exactly 5 minutes reviewing specific flagged hands from your last real-world session. You aren't just looking at whether you won or lost the money. You're looking at the AI's analysis of the decision point.
Okay, so there is the immediate objective feedback loop we were missing at the very beginning of this deep dive.
Yes. Then comes the core of the workout. 10 minutes of intense scenario-based drills. The RangeFlow AI puts you in a simulated high-pressure spot based specifically on your known weaknesses.
Oh.
For example, let's say your screen shows you holding pocket tens. The community cards come down. Jack, 7, 2. You're facing an opponent who just check-raised you. The pot is simulated. You have a timer ticking down. You have to commit to a physical decision.
You can't just pause the video and say, I'd probably fold.
No, you have to click the button. You click bet or fold. And the system instantly tells you if your choice matched the optimal exploit for that specific opponent's behavioral profile.
And if you get it wrong,
the system immediately corrects you with the data. It shows you exactly why the opponent's range of hands meant you should have called. Finally, you spend the last 5 minutes of the loop doing focused reading on one single concept, just a bite-sized lesson to solidify the exact drill you just failed. 20 minutes total.
that forced commitment during those 10 minutes of drills is where the actual magic happens, I think. Because when you get the drill wrong, there's a momentary sting to your ego. That little spike of frustration is the anchor for memory.
Exactly. You didn't just passively agree with a video lecture. You experienced a failure, and you were immediately handed the data to fix it. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we've established this 20-minute daily habit away from the table. But the sources are very clear that you still have to translate this systematized approach to the actual moments when you sit down to play.
Right. Because humans are fundamentally emotional creatures.
We get tired, we get angry, we go on tilt.
The structural guardrails they suggest for this are fascinating. The sources have this great line about the pregame routine. They say that opening the app or walking into a casino and just sitting down at a table is the equivalent of showing up to a professional boxing match without stretching or taping your hands.
It's just asking for a knockout.
Yeah.
Consistent, profitable players spend 5 minutes before a session reviewing their last 3 games. And here is the crucial detail. They do not give themselves 10 different complex things to work on. They pick one single focus point. For example, they tell themselves, tonight, my only goal is to look for spots, to check raise the flop when I have a flush draw. That's it. It anchors the mind. It gives the brain a specific task, which prevents that session-to-session emotional roller coaster where you're just playing based on your mood.
And there's a very harsh financial reality attached to all this discipline. We talked earlier about those 47 common exploitable mistakes the average thinking player makes. The RangeFlow data assigns a mathematical concept called expected value, or EV, to those mistakes.
Right.
For the listener, EV is basically the mathematical value of decision over the long run. Every time you make one of those 47 errors, like folding a hand out of fear when the math says you should call, or betting the wrong size, you are losing mathematically $20 to $100 or more in expected value.
And remember, you are making several of these specific mistakes every single time you sit down to play. It is an invisible, massive leak in your bankroll.
So the math on fixing this is just wild. If you just fix 3 or 4 of those leaks per session, you are saving hundreds of dollars a night. For someone playing 3 times a week, that is $1,200 to $3,600 a month in money. You are literally no longer lighting on fire.
It adds up fast.
Right. And this is where the sources organically introduce the tool itself. The RangeFlow AI software costs $27 a month, and it comes with these incredible features like 13 by 13 range matrices.
Which are so helpful.
Yeah, for anyone who hasn't seen one, imagine a visual grid, 13 squares by 13 squares, mapping out every single possible 2-card starting hand in Texas Ho Out. It's color-coded to tell you exactly what to do with every hand in every position. It also has a multiplayer simulator to spar with friends and a 247 strategy chatbot. At $27, it essentially pays for itself if it prevents you from making a single bad decision in one pot.
But the real overarching value of the AI isn't just acting as a static solver that just gives you the answers. Its true value is acting as a translator during the post-game routine.
How so? Like, what do you mean by translator?
After a game ends, human psychology works against you. You have a roughly 15-minute window before your memory of the hands begins to decay. And more importantly, before your ego starts rewriting the narrative to make you either the unlucky victim or the conquering hero.
Oh, that is so true.
The RangeFlow system asks you to flag 2 to 3 hands immediately. Not the biggest pots you won or the most money you lost. It wants the decision points, the spots where you hesitated, where your gut felt murky and uncertain.
Because the uncertainty is where the actual growth is hiding.
Precisely. But most people cannot articulate why a situation felt wrong. The AI takes that vague, uncomfortable gut feeling, runs all the ranges, calculates the bet sizings against the pool tendencies of millions of hands, and translates your anxiety into a concrete, data-backed lesson.
Wow.
It literally turns human intuition into empirical data.
So what does this all mean? If we pull all the way back from the poker tables, the flop, the river, and the chips, the overarching lesson from this massive stack of sources is that mastery is a system, not a talent. Whether you are trying to crush a high-stakes cash game, negotiate a higher salary at your corporate job, or learn a complex new language, you have to swap out your unreliable feelings for a structured framework that survives the pressure of the moment. It means you have to stop passively consuming information, nodding along to videos, and start actively testing your decisions against immediate, unsparing feedback.
It requires a fundamental shift in how we view our own competence. We have to accept the uncomfortable truth that our instincts are very often wrong, they're heavily biased, and they're driven by fear or ego.
Yeah.
But the silver lining is that they are entirely fixable. And this raises an important, perhaps even slightly unsettling question for you to take away today.
Lay it on us.
The RangeFlow AI proved that across 4 million hands of high-pressure decision-making, human irrationality is not random. It is highly predictable, boiling down to 47 specific, exploitable mistakes.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder, if a machine algorithm can map out exactly how and when your opponents will panic, how they will overcompensate, and how they will fold under pressure at a card table.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. Consider how algorithms in financial markets or the attention economy of social media are already systematically hunting our predictable cognitive blind spots. Where else in your daily life are your own deeply personal, unpredictable human instincts actually completely predictable to a machine that is optimizing for its own expected value?
Oof. That is a thought that is going to stick with me. We all like to think we're making unique, spontaneous choices, but maybe we're just playing right into the data set. It brings us right back to the core lesson of the day. It is time to stop guessing in the dark, hoping your feelings are right. Turn on the lights, look at the data, and see where you're actually aiming.